I'm Dr. Andy Kaufman, recovering physician, plandemic whistleblower, natural healing pedagogue, and legal code talker. You can call me the Truth Doctor. I'm here to shift your paradigm as I perform a radical forensic dissection, discerning fact from fiction, science from pseudoscience, medicine from poison, law from legal fiction, and individualism from collectivism. This is your channel for unraveling the truth about health and science. This is the Healthy Living Livestream. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healthy Living Livestream. I am Dr. Andrew Kaufman, and this is sort of a special Thanksgiving edition of the show because we had some technical difficulties on Wednesday, so I apologize to the viewers for the delay, but I wanted to come and do a special version of this so that we wouldn't miss the important information. And I'm going to depart a little bit from my usual format of presenting scientific papers to talk about my own journey as a, entrepreneur trying to sell a product that I felt was very useful and helpful for health. And I'm talking about none other than Shilajit. So how did I find and source this material, and what are the pitfalls of that journey from my own experience? Now, let me tell you that I first heard about Shilajit, and it took me a little while to learn how to pronounce it and how to spell it, of course, from Dr. Jennifer Daniels, whose work I studied extensively as I was learning natural healing. And what I figured out is that a lot of people had a lot of health benefits from this, from hearing the callers on her show describe their experiences. And I knew that a big part of it was because Shilajit contains a lot of trace minerals, which are essentially metals that our body needs to utilize in conjunction with our proteins, and that these are the ones that we need in very small amounts, things like molybdenum and manganese, copper, etc. And so I learned more about this. I started taking it myself, noticed the benefits, and then I wanted to sell it because it was something that I feel is useful to take on an ongoing basis, and I do that myself. So what did I learn about it? Well, what is Shilajit exactly? And so there is the formation of this mineral material in mountains that's been discovered by, ancient cultures and civilizations going back thousands of years. It's most well known in Ayurvedic medicine, but there are many other cultures that also utilize this mineral material. And what happens is that in the mountains and various mountain regions around the world, including the Himalayas most famously, but also in the Caucasus Mountains and some mountains in South and Central America, as well as even North America. So really, this is something that is found, generally speaking, in mountain regions, but there are some areas that have higher amounts of this material. And the ore, which is what you actually harvest from nature, is generally seen in rocky outcroppings. And this material is a little bit like dirt. It's a mineral-rich kind of soil material, but it has much higher mineral and fulvic acid concentrations than any old regular dirt. So this is something special, and it's thought that it's an ancient decomposed forest that, under the pressure and time of the tectonic plates shifting and forming a mountain, that this material under pressure decomposes into this Shilajit ore. And this has been used, as I said, for millennia for a variety of reported health benefits in Ayurvedic medicine and other indigenous cultural medicine practices. Once you harvest this ore, then you have to purify it, and that is generally done simply by putting it in water, potentially applying heat to that, and then filtering it and repeating this process several times until you get a very pure product. And then usually some amount of water is left or added to the material to make it into a resin or a paste. Sometimes it is used as a powder in different formulations, and other times it can be further diluted into a liquid, which is the first product that I have been selling as Shilajit. Now, along this process and the continuation of the process to the marketplace, there are a number of issues that I'm going to discuss. But let me begin by saying that, traditionally in these nations that have harvested this material for thousands of years, there are local tribes or groups or families that have done this work because it requires climbing up the mountains to a higher altitude. Now, this material is found at different altitudes, but the higher the altitude, generally speaking, the richer the mineral content and the purer, the more purity of the starting material. So the highest quality material is at the highest altitude, and that involves more skill and risk of climbing those mountains to get the material. And this is further complicated by seasonal weather patterns, because the higher altitudes are going to get colder and start to get snow and ice, which makes them impossible to climb and harvest. So during the warmer months, depending on what region we're talking about, there is a limited window to harvest this material. And of course, at the lower altitudes where the lower quality material is, you can harvest it for longer periods during the year because it'll stay warm for longer. So this, of course, difficulty and risk would obviously lend itself to some forms of corruption for efficiency, to make sure that you can harvest more material in a shorter time, so that you can make ends meet. And I understand the pressure of people harvesting it to perhaps consider taking shortcuts from time to time. So let me tell you about a couple of these problems. So one is that much of the time when the family or the people go to harvest this, they're going to purify the material, at least the initial purification, up in the mountains, which means using water in order to mix with the ore. Now, depending on the site and the altitude and other factors, there are often other mining operations in these areas. And many of these mining operations, especially in countries that maybe are less developed or poorer, they're not going to be very well regulated, and they dump their waste materials often into the natural streams that may be in the mountains. And the same streams can be used as a source of water for this initial purification, and that can lend itself to contamination. And most troublesome would be contamination with industrial heavy metals, which may be byproducts of some of the mining operations. So this is one major issue that we have to be very, very careful about when sourcing the material. Another issue that has come up, and this has been reported in India and in Russia with harvesting the Shilajit, is that they can exploit child labor. So this is something that is very important to be wary of. And because of the risk and the danger, they may have unsafe practices because of, they may be poor people, they may be desperate to make a living and not be able to afford the right equipment or the right training to climb safely. So you want to make sure that we don't support operations like that where they are taking unsafe practices that will put them at further risk. I'd rather pay more for the product where the people working to create the product are having a positive, safe experience. And, part of that is the respect for others' health and welfare, but also if they are under duress and fear and risk, then the energy that they have, it may be translated into the product, which can potentially affect the quality. And then the last major problem that I learned about was that many times adulterants are added, so like fillers to the material to essentially increase their profit margins. And it would be common with any type of expensive natural material that it could be, of course, cut. Like we know illegal drugs are often adulterated this way. And some of the things reported to be added to Shilajit to increase the volume, even things like coal and fertilizer, because they're similar color and texture to the Shilajit material. And I've even heard of sawdust being added to it. So we definitely have to be careful. We want a pure, unadulterated product. Now, when I first made an attempt to identify a source of Shilajit, I was only aware that it was available in Russia and in India. So I looked to those places to source the material. And in fact, just so you know, in Russia, they have a different name for it. They call it mumio. So you might have heard it be referred to as Shilajit mumio or just mumio or just Shilajit, of course. So I searched on the internet and found quite a number of companies that purported to, be distributors or wholesalers of a variety of Shilajit products. And I attempted to contact a whole bunch of them to see what I could find out. Now, of course, when I contacted them, I requested information on the product itself, like where it was sourced and analytical reports on heavy metals, microbiological testing, and what minerals are contained in their particular Shilajit, because there's going to be some differences in variety depending on where it's harvested. And almost always the responses I got back simply ignored the requests for that information and were much more concerned or only concerned with how much I wanted to buy and how quickly I needed it. And I couldn't get anyone to provide me with actual information. And we're talking about 10 different suppliers that I reached out to. And then I started talking to some other people who were in this business in the United States whom I trusted, and found out that, there are a lot of disreputable companies involved in this business. And, what happens is that you have local people who harvest it and purify the material, and then they bring it to the market. And there are all these companies that represent, some middleman type businesses. And I think they're the ones that take shortcuts, put pressure on the harvesters, add the adulterants, and have unsavory business practices. And when I was trying to do business, with someone in another country, that further complicates it in terms of cultural differences, language barriers, just trying to schedule a meeting or a call in different time zones, all those complications. So I felt like it was going to be impossible to find a reliable and legitimate source. And then, very luckily, I came across another option. And this was a North American supply from the Rocky Mountains. And I didn't even know that existed until I started talking to some people in my network. And so I found out that there were a few people, but not very many, who were harvesting Shilajit in North America, but that these were from different areas. And some of the areas produced a very high quality material, and other areas had some issues with heavy metal contamination. And so I found a supplier who had the high quality material and had really the most impressive testing results that I had seen, with very good safe levels of heavy metals and a good variety of vital nutrients. And this is the material that has been in my Shilajit product since 2020. But unfortunately, what happened is, because this is a very small industry and there are really individual people making up the small group of harvesters that the man who is harvesting it for our supply decided to change his business model and was no longer available to supply us with product. And this came about very, very suddenly for me. And if you're a customer, you probably have experienced seeing on my website that we have been back ordered, and we had outstanding orders that we expected to be able to fulfill. And then we got hit with this surprise. So I, of course, immediately tried to find another source, but it was not easy at all. So one thing is the other North American suppliers, and I can't tell you the quality of any of their products, but they're basically very small operations and are only supplying for their own business and not supplying other distributors or retailers at all. So there was really no other option for North American Shilajit. So that put me back in the position that I was not very comfortable with, of looking for a foreign source. And while I was doing this, I started investigating, the other Shilajit brands that are out there and looking, at their websites and the information about them. And I realized a couple of things. One is that most of them didn't talk about these issues that I'm talking about today, the difficulties in the industry. And also in terms of having testing reports available to the customers, very few of them had it immediately available. There were some brands that talked about the importance of it, but you had to request it specially to get a copy of their actual lab results, specifically about the levels of heavy metals, because in my opinion, that is the most important concern of having a good quality Shilajit. And as I started looking at some of these testing reports, I realized that they were not reported in a uniform fashion. Now, in terms of the published safety margins for these metals, and there are different sources. Of course, there are government sources, which you may not trust as much, but there's also the health ranger, Mike Adams, has a whole system of evaluating levels of heavy metals in products like food or supplements. They're reported in ppms, generally parts per million of the material, but I noticed that some of the reports from other retailers were using different units, and units that make the number itself look smaller. If it was reported, in other words, if it was reported in ppms, the number would look large and may even exceed some of the guidelines. Like California, for example, has a special law limiting the amount of lead, particularly. The four heavy metals that are usually tested for in these products would be lead, arsenic, cadmium, and mercury. But in California, as I said, there are specific regulations for lead, and some of these numbers I saw actually exceeded that. And this would make it difficult for them to sell in California. They would have to have a special language on their label, for example. So in other words, it's very difficult to find a product that you can clearly trust. You really need to do a lot of due diligence, and that's what I tried to do. And eventually, after weeks, I did identify a company in the United States who has been importing Shilajit from, a known source, like directly from the harvester, for a number of decades. And this supplier had all of the analytical reports. In fact, did a lot more testing than I would even think would be necessary. Things like to prove that there are no GMO products in Shilajit, which of course, it's something harvested from nature, formed, said to be over millions of years, way before there was any GMO technology. And it's, of course, not a living organism either. But nevertheless, to see that level of detail really gave me a lot of confidence. And then I was able to try the product myself, do some testing myself to be fully convinced that this is a reliable source and a very high quality product. And I have been, taking this product now myself for a couple of months, and have had excellent results and no untoward effects. So when it comes to evaluating, what is a good product in terms of Shilajit, which is an excellent um, supplement that contains, as I said, a large complement of the needed trace minerals that are extremely difficult or impossible to get in a regular diet, that you have to be aware of many of these pitfalls and assure yourself that the product you're taking is safe. It hasn't had industrial contamination. It hasn't been adulterated with other unsafe substances. There is no exploitation of the labor. There are no unruly middlemen involved in the product. And, the company itself is not trying to hide or bury any testing results so that you have the impression that the product is safe when it really isn't. So, of course, I am in this business myself and have a stake in it. But what I offer is that I put myself out there and stake my own reputation on the safety and effectiveness of any of the products I sell. And I'm very proud to offer Authentica Shilajit. So if you're interested, there's detailed information available in the links provided. And of course, like most others, we are offering a special Cyber Week sale that would really lower the risk for you to give it a try. So please check out those links and learn more about Authentica Shilajit. All right. Well, that concludes my story for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would be happy to take a few questions. All right. Sven Olason. Why is there more minerals in Shilajit from higher altitudes? Well, I don't really have a definitive answer for that question. This is simply what is found when these different ores are tested. But I think the geological hypothesis would be that the areas on the top of the mountain are older geologically and have been under heat and pressure for longer periods of time. So that can potentially enrich the mineral content. But like I said, I can't really give you a definitive answer, because the only way that we can hypothesize about how Shilajit was formed is really only based on inferential evidence. In other words, there's no experiment where somebody tried to, make Shilajit from nature, and which, of course, may take a time scale that's unreasonable to replicate, in a laboratory type of experiment. So I don't even know if it's possible to know. But the important thing is that we can always test the material, and we can see, the levels and the number of different minerals in each product. All right. John Roach asks, how does Shilajit compare to fulvic minerals? Well, that is a good question, and these are similar products. It's just that fulvic minerals are generally not harvested in alpine areas. They're generally mined from the earth. But they also contain fulvic acid. Now, fulvic acid is the chelating substance that plants use to extract minerals out of the soil. And so you're often going to find fulvic acid in combination with minerals if they are from a plant source. And this is found in a variety of deposits in the earth that can be mined. When I've looked at the analytical testing for fulvic minerals that are commercially available, I generally find that they have about 15 to 25 different trace minerals, whereas Shilajit generally has about 50 or more trace minerals. So I think that is the main difference, but fulvic minerals is definitely a reasonable alternative. All right. Scott Fox asks, sea moss versus Shilajit for mineral content. Well, sea moss, interestingly, was the topic of my last live stream. And I showed in there that it does contain a few minerals, but not in amounts that would really be helpful, and certainly nowhere near the spectrum of minerals contained in Shilajit. And then there may be other health concerns with sea moss, specifically about carrageenan, and then, of course, also potential heavy metal contamination. So please check out that live stream for more detailed information. All right. Joseph Polari asks, can we assume the new product is much more potent than previous being a resin? So the different formulation between a resin and a liquid doesn't change the potency depending on the serving size. So, for example, what I'm saying is that the raw material, right, is like a powder or a solid, okay, an aggregate. When it's made into a paste or resin, there is some moisture content that's added. If you add more water, then it becomes a liquid. So you are diluting it, but you're going to have a different serving size. So, for example, the 100 milligrams of the resin material, right, would be contained in a certain amount of the liquid material. It would just be a larger volume than the 100 milligrams of the resin would take up. So this is something that, should be any type of formulation, because you can also get Shilajit in capsules, you can get it in gummies. And no matter how it's formulated, there still is going to be a certain amount of the actual Shilajit material in each serving. And that should be, roughly equivalent, although there is no standardized way of, creating the appropriate serving size of Shilajit, because every product from different sources is going to have different composition, right? But what you see across the board really is that almost all of the sellers have 100 milligrams as their serving size. All right, I hope that answers your question. Okay, Evan C. asks, can I double, triple, or more the daily dose, or will it put me over the toxic limit? So this is one of the questions where it's extremely useful to have the amounts of heavy metals, because you can, if you have those test results, you can calculate exactly how much of the heavy metals, because these products, they're not going to be free of the heavy metals. Some of them may be free of 1 or 2 heavy metals, but they'll all have some degree of these, but they're going to be in very, very tiny amounts. And most likely the natural heavy metals that are in Shilajit are of a more natural form that is not nearly as toxic as the forms for industrial use or as a byproduct of mining, etc. But you can look at those levels and then, see how much is in each serving, and then say, okay, if I have 3 times that amount, is that still a safe level? And I would make my decision about it that way. But if you're talking about for a short-term use, then it certainly would be safe. And I'm talking about, a period of maybe 1 to 3 months is not going to lead to any significant problems. But we need an ongoing supply of trace minerals throughout our lifespan. So it's really much more the cumulative toxicity that would occur if you have a product that has higher levels of these toxic metals that I would be concerned about. All right, Sven Oleisen asks another question. What results have you had yourself using Shilajit? So in my experience, initially I did feel some increase in energy and mental clarity, but that is a little bit difficult to characterize. It's less objective, but I think the biggest result I had was in my attempt to regrow my hair from, the typical male baldness. Now, I'm not completely filled with thick hair as I was in my 20s, but I definitely have had a lot of new hair growth. And in my opinion, Shilajit and the minerals it provides are a key aspect of that. And I think also we have to look at our own individual differences, because depending on our own experience, we may, be sensitive to deficiencies of certain minerals because of, our exposure. Like we were really deficient, in some things we happen to get from a random source here or there. So there are all kinds of stories about interesting things improving when people start replenishing their minerals. And I think you'll have to try it for yourself to see exactly what kind of benefits you're going to get. One other thing to mention is that there are a lot of testimonials talking about how people were affected by the product on my website, as well as a timeline of what your general expectations can be as you continue to take this product in the short and medium term. So good question, Sven. I think I can take one more question, Alexander. So we have Natalie Payette. I take Ibiza marine plasma daily. Why should I take also Shilajit? Well, I would have to look, of course, at the specifics of that product. And marine plasma is a source of seawater that is from special areas in the ocean where there's a vortex, and there tends to be, now I could be a little bit wrong about the details, but there tends to be a higher concentration of minerals and organic material in certain areas of the ocean, and this is known as marine plasma. And this is a product that is also rich in minerals. So I think you need to look at the individual product and see, which and how many minerals are in it. Of course, also there is the possibility of heavy metal contamination in seawater. So we'll need to look at that, and microplastics. So those things, of course, need to be looked at. When I've looked at some different examples, that they haven't contained as many minerals as Shilajit, so that might be one reason to try both. But they might also complement each other. And I've had several clients tell me that they alternate these products, like one day marine plasma, one day Shilajit, or 1 week on, 1 week off, like that. So I think you have to do a little bit of due diligence to see the details of the specific products that you're talking about, but you can also combine these to get kind of the best of the land and the best of the sea, right? Because these are, of course, 2 of the 3 alchemical elements. All right, well, I really enjoyed today's presentation and discussion. I hope you did too. I hope everyone enjoyed their family and time with friends over the Thanksgiving holiday, and I look forward to seeing everyone next week for another Healthy Living live stream.